Given how many different sources of advice you can get, how do you choose who to listen to? Because you'll get
conflicting advice all the time. There's no right or wrong here. I think it's ultimately like what fits you the best, right? Like you can't pretend to be somebody else, but you can take bits and pieces from tactics that other people have used and incorporate them better into your life. Nobody services human beings better than Richard Lovett. The guy who runs CA is the single best I've ever seen. It's because he's ridiculously curious. And so the tactic that I learned from him is at the end is like, how can I make what's the one thing that I can do to make your life better? In almost every interaction I've ever seen him have, he finds a way to ask that question, either explicitly like that, or he just hears it. And he follows up on that one thing and delivers like some piece of value to a person's life. And it might be years that he might never happen. He might never take advantage of that. He just adds value without asking a single thing in return. And it's like, it's driven his entire career through the roof because he keeps doing it. And like, you know, you just pick up these little things that like fit you really well. You're like, I know that's a tactic I can do and I can pick up and learn. It fits me really well. I can go from there. And so you pick up like little bits and pieces from different people. And if you hear conflicting advice, whichever fits you the best, I think is the one that works.
My advice would be this, Matt, is, and I'll just give a small plug for my blog because I've written a whole treatise on this, is if you go to bothsidesthetable.com on Google, bothsidesthetable.com space triangulate, and I've written about this topic, and here's what I actually believe. So occasionally you will hear advice in Silicon Valley, which is don't listen to anyone who gives advice. Because your situation is different than anyone else's, and anyone giving advice almost is a shuckster or a fraud. Right? and that is a meme and an ethos amongst some very successful people in the Valley, and it's about the worst advice. I mean, it's ironic in that it itself is actually advice, right? So when I've read articles by people who say that or watch interviews, I want to point out the irony of it, but I generally don't. But here's the thing. You need to take every topic in your life and constantly be curious. And that's what I mean by triangulate. A little bit from you and a little bit from you and a little bit from you. And then you kind of mix it in a pot. And two things happen. One is over time I realize, take Fred Wilson, consistently great advice. And I'm like, okay, if I have a hard topic, I know I can ask that. And maybe there's some other people who occasionally sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. And there's some people over time you're like, that guy's advice or that woman's advice just hasn't been great over time, and you just cut them out. But anyway.
Deal flow works like that too.
Yes. And you triangulate, and then in the end, you really have to trust your judgment.
Yeah.
And if you don't have good judgment, then, you know, I guess you need to be realistic in your career about your role, and you probably shouldn't be the number one or the person making big decisions.
Yep.
But in the end, if you have really good judgment, you listen well, you can contextualize advice, and then apply it specifically to your situation. Because otherwise you end up with what people call mentor whiplash. Like, you tell me this and you tell me that, and I'm going to do a little of this, and it doesn't work.
No, you have to incorporate, and then you have to like listen, and then incorporate into your own authentic, and then move forward.
Right, you need to seek it. And I think that's what makes you effective, because you're constantly
I care about
asking people.
The other thing I would add to that is like, I learn a lot by seeing how other people behave, and I learn about like watching Chris, how he interacts with entrepreneurs and how we sit in those boards. And the years that I spent sitting on boards at CA, like getting to observe like David Z and Jeff Blackburn and guys on the board of one of the companies that we built there, and Yanover, and watching guys like that and getting to see that, you start to pick up things that people would never say explicitly, but how they word a criticism, how they phrase a criticism, or how they advise a company in a certain direction. There's a lot of mentorship that you can pick up passively without ever having to ask for it specifically if you're just curious and read. Like, we've never had a moment as transparent as this with great VCs who have a ton of track record and great advice, and you can just go out in there and read it all right now. It's like, spend the time to do that. I spent a ton of time doing that.